Anyone seen the documentary The Imposter? If you haven't seen the documentary, I recommend it. I saw it on Netflix maybe a year ago, and I don't think it's on there anymore. If you have, what are your thoughts? Do you think the family really took the French boy in because they wanted to cover up the fact that they murdered their son? Or did they really believe the French boy was this childhood friend murdered 1984? Need help please. I lost touch with a girl I used to play with when I started high school. I found out she died 1 year after graduation. Turns out she was murdered. The one mutual friend who knows more details won't talk about it, and almost nothing online. I found pic of gravesite in Alameda, Cap, and a news article that I can't read from Reno Gazette in 1984, saying she and her mother were found shot in their home on Thanksgiving Day 1984. Found by estranged husband and son. Very sad and surprising, because she was one of the smartest kids I knew. Never got into trouble, or hung around questionable PPL. My friend's name / Catherine or Kathy A. Ellis. Mom's name was Anne. In school they lived in Northern California. Anything that can be found, including if perpetrator was found, would be appreciated. I don't really even know where it happened. Thanks. Edit, I've got so many good replies and suggestions. Also thanks for the info I couldn't find or access. You all are the best. Since online info is sparse, we'll schedule a visit to local library next time I pass through. I can't promise I'll report back quickly, but I will. But, by all means, to anyone just reading now and have thoughts, I want to hear them. And if you live in Contra Costa County and have the time to check at any local libraries, it's not much, but I'll upvote everything you ever post on Reddit again for the rest of my days. Thanks, you awesome people. Just wanted to say I love this subreddit. Long time lurker. First time poster. Thank you all for the interesting posts / comments / etc. You'll rock like Gibraltar, which is a really big rock. What are some cases where Occam's razor was not the solution? In discussing unresolved cases, it is very common to invoke Occam's razor, or more accurately people call on the so-called most easiest / simplest solution as the most likely theory. Putting aside the fact that Occam's razor is not always applicable to human behavior, there are times when the solution hasn't been the simplest answer, and has in fact been a very complicated or rather out there solution. What are some cases where this has been true? Any good cases of people who just spontaneously ceased to exist? I recently found out about Owen Parfit. It's seriously so confusing, and I love it. I would love to hear about more cases like this. I'll give a quick rundown about the case. In the 1760s, a guy named Owen has a disease which has made walking impossible. He lives with his older sister who cares for him and helps him move around the house. Apparently he had a spot right near the front door which he sat in frequently and enjoyed. Anyway, his sister helps him into his chair. He covered himself with a coat and happily sat away. His sister did some chores, came back maybe an hour later, and Owen is no longer in his chair. All that was left was his coat. The sister thought that maybe a neighbor had come by and helped him inside. She looked in the house and found no sign of Owen. She spoke to neighbors and none had moved or seen him. He was never seen again, and no trail was left as to what happened. It's such an interesting story. Too bad it will never be solved. Sadly, the case of Owen has never and will never be solved. I can't even really pinpoint a theory for this case. I think that's why I enjoy it so much. Any other cases like this one, a little less known ones, would be awesome to hear about. What is the one case you cannot believe they have not solved yet? Does anyone else find it creepy as fuck that EARONS lived for 30 years in a neighborhood that he had terrorized? Imagine living there and thinking, well, he's definitely not here anymore, and then he's your crazy as fuck neighbor who screams at you. With the latest EARONS news, I want to share a heartfelt statement to everyone. It has been an emotional week since the East Area rapist / original Night Stalker, Joseph James D'Angelo, was identified and caught. I'm still trying to process the fact that there are a name and a face to the monarchy that has plagued California for over 4 decades. I can't even begin to comprehend how survivors and family members are feeling right now, knowing the monster in the dark has been brought to light and there is no escape for him. There are no open windows. There are no glass sliding doors. There are no bicycles. There are only bars. With all of this happening, I want to share an honest message and confession of my own. For the better part of 2 years, I became obsessed with this case. The story of it all enthralled me to the point where I absorbed every piece of information I could. When I discovered this subreddit, I knew it was a place where there was an active community that was equally consumed as I was. To be honest, I was intimidated at first. There were so many knowledgeable people who knew the case backward and forward, and I thought there was nothing I could do to contribute in a way that would be beneficial. Nonetheless, I proceeded to learn more and eventually expanded into sharing my thoughts, theories, opinions and creating a 12-part series on the case. Within that time frame, I met amazing people here and have developed friendships. I may not know your real names, but the fact that we speak regularly is a beautiful thing to me. Some of you have motivated me, gave me inspiration, pushed me to be better, made me want to be more credible and reliable, irritated me, tested my patience, and it was all for the best, because those traits I acquired seeped into my personal life, and it helped me become a better person. Over time, people considered me well informed on the case, and sought answers from me, even when I didn't deserve that type of acknowledgement. When I was presented with that responsibility, I wanted to ignore it, because I personally felt inadequate. But I finally accepted that role and strove to live up to those expectations. Due to that level of accountability, I discovered my passion writing blogging about true crime. That's when I really started to have the genuine desire to not only discuss this case, but to also bring more light to it. There were no ulterior motives. I simply wanted to spread awareness. I'm aware of how cliche that is. At one point I considered writing a book about the case, but I felt guilty for doing so. In fact, I felt rather ashamed that I made a name for myself here, because none of those things was my intention. Nevertheless, some of these things were completely out of my control. I simply took things one day at a time and let life unfold as it may. 2 years later, I'm unbelievably thankful for each and every one of you. That's not hyperbole. You all have changed my life in ways I never thought was possible, especially in terms of being an adult. To put it plainly, I grew up, in reality, away from the computer. Those positive changes has flowed wonderfully, and I became a better person, an individual that I thought was impossible to achieve. Thank you for everything. Now, I want to give an honest message about Joseph D'Angelo himself. With him now under constraints, I can't help but harken back to 2 statements he once made. First was a phone call to the police when he professed, "You're never going to catch me, you dumb fuckers." The second is to a victim he harassed and told her, "You think you're smart, but I'm smarter than you." What a glorious day it is knowing that this heinous monster is officially apprehended, and by some of the original police task force. He may have eluded capture for longer than we all hoped or even anticipated, but he eventually got caught, and his mugshot is spread across the nation. His face is revealed, and he looks old, tired, and miserable. Science reigns supreme and the justice will be beautiful. As I alluded to earlier in my post, I was plagued by this case for 2 years. I couldn't look at a glass sliding door or walk by a fence without thinking of him. Every time I read about a burglary in the local newspaper, he came to mind. When I went to sleep at night, I often wondered if he was alive, dead, in prison, or in another country. I scoured over details of each crime scene trying to find a connection that would lead to his identification. A part of me almost came to admire his ability to turn into a ghost and disappear from the responsibilities of life, because so many people knew a lot about him, yet also knew nothing at all. However, answers are revealing, and one thing is made abundantly evident: he's not unique or special. Some of the theories on him were right, some were wrong. Those that were accurate represent the fact that he is a real human being, because over 40 years he almost turned into a myth and urban legend. He wasn't a ghost. He had a career, family and children, a means of travel, a place he called home. Right now, he's only a bitter old man whose dark past is now exposed. As a result, it's becoming clear that many things he left behind in his attacks weren't all red herrings. Rather, they were insecurities being presented in the crimes because of his own self-hatred and brokenness as an individual. Ultimately, he is a victim of poetic justice because he was caught at his own game by people smarter than him. just as he has done to countless of innocent people. He was surveilled for days. His routines and habits were learned. Then one day, unbeknownst to him, he was blitzed, caught off guard and left speechless. His hands were bound behind his back and had absolutely zero control. Now, he's going to have to endure the same treatment he instilled in his victims. All of those lives that were dismantled because of him will get their time to speak in court without being interrupted. If he dares to speak, they get to intervene and say, "Shut up." They get to seize control and walk around the courtroom while he sits helplessly in handcuffs. When it's all said and done, they get to walk to freedom, opening the courtroom doors and be gone in the night while he rots in jail for the rest of his life. Today, life is beautiful.